I call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the February 10, 2025 City of Kalispell's work session. Two exciting issues this evening. The first item, Ashley Creek use attainability analysis. But before we jump into the fun, let's have a roll call, can we?
Yes, you can. Councillor Gabrielle?
Here.
Councillor Graham?
Here.
Councillor Dowd?
Here.
Councillor Dahlman?
Here.
Councillor Fisher?
Here.
Councillor Hunter?
Here.
Councillor Nunnally?
Here.
Councillor Carlson?
Here.
Mayor Johnson?
Here. All right, Mr. Russell.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, as I mentioned at last week's meeting, we'd have a work session tonight to give an update on the use attainability analysis as it relates to Ashley Creek. This is a project we've been working on for years to, in conjunction with the EQ, to review kind of the dynamics of Ashley Creek and our wastewater treatment and the applicability of associated standards with that for our discharge permit. So to give the staff report, I'll turn it over to our Public Works Director, Susie Turner.
Thank you, Doug. Your Honor and council members, I need the presentation on. Let's see. Tonight we're going to provide an informational presentation on Ashley Creek and the use attainability analysis that's been performed and submitted to DEQ. We are going to go through the background, the analysis and UAA process, and the current status, where we're at right now and what next steps are going to need to take place. We started this process back in 2018 when we procured HDR to help guide us through the analysis and ultimately developing site-specific standards. Tonight I'll be co-presenting with Ricky Schultz. Ricky is a project manager with HDR and has extensive knowledge in wastewater treatment and permitting process. I've been working with Ricky on the wastewater treatment plant and our permit for over 15 years, I believe, actually. So he's very involved with our plant process and our permitting, which involves Ashley Creek. So going and jumping right into the background, as most of you know, the Kalispell Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant discharges treated effluent into the lower segments of Ashley Creek. The treatment plant is a very sophisticated treatment process, and we've been performing this type of process since the early 1990s. Over many decades, the city has made significant investments to maintain a high-quality treatment. Before making any additional treatment investments for our wastewater treatment plant, we wanted to make sure that Kalispell's future investments are based on scientific knowledge and protects the actual water quality and beneficial uses of Ashley Creek. Nutrient standards are in a bit of a regulatory limbo, if you will, and they have been really for the past several years. But there's always one takeaway from those discussions with DEQ, whether it be numeric or narrative standards. They always link back to a regional study conducted by DEQ on the standard wadeable stream within the western ecoregion of this state. City staff has long been concerned that applying these regional stream standards to that lower section of Ashley Creek are just inaccurate and inappropriate. To address this, a site-specific analysis was conducted to study the unique past and present conditions of Ashley Creek in hopes to reflect what should be more accurate future standards that support the unique conditions of this water body. The site-specific analysis conducted extensive water quality, geomorphic, and aquatic life studies on the middle and lower sections of Ashley Creek. These studies revealed that achieving the water quality standards associated with the creek's classified beneficial uses may not be feasible due to the inherent natural conditions of the creek itself, which, with the support of DEQ, leads us down a path of the UAA analysis. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ricky, and he's going to start going through the process we've been through for the last several years. There you go.
All right. Thank you, Susie. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I wanted to, in talking about this work, begin where we started the whole process, which was putting together a couple of planning documents. One was a sampling plan that described what were we going to sample in Ashley Creek and when, and the other was a quality plan that we also developed. And both of those documents were submitted to DEQ, reviewed and approved by them before we had anyone out in the field doing this work. So we typically had 2 personnel out in the field on Ashley Creek in the surrounding area, and they were at work during the summer months. That's when, as Susie's previous slide had, I believe, when these standards proposed by DEQ would apply, was during the summer months. So for 5 summers, we performed work on Ashley Creek. At the conclusion of that field work, we reviewed data, reviewed all the information we collected. We put together what we called a data summary report, and we submitted that to DEQ. And so after a summer's worth of work, come the following spring, we met with DEQ and talked about the results. And so as we went through this process, it was it kind of evolved. As we went from year to year, we often would realize something in the data or being out in the field, and that would lead to additional things that we wanted to look at. So that's some of the things I'll talk about here. So first, just to look at the area that we perform this work. The red dots are all the water quality sampling sites that we performed the work at. And you can see we went pretty far upstream on Ashley Creek, upstream, that is, from the wastewater treatment plant, all the way down almost to the confluence with Flathead River. So it was a pretty extensive, expansive study area. The parameters we analyzed, I'm not going to bore you all with the alphabet soup that's on this slide, but the point here is it was again a number of parameters that we looked at. That only included not only water quality parameters listed mostly on the left and some on the right, but we also looked at algae within the water body of Ashley Creek, algae that was on rocks, insects, so on and so forth. So it was a pretty extensive list of parameters that we were looking at during this study. And those samples went anywhere from a local lab here in Kalispell to a lab down in Missoula to some of the samples collected went to University of Pennsylvania. So. So as I mentioned, as the study kind of evolved as we went year to year. And so the picture on the left is some equipment and apparatus that DEQ developed, and they actually let us borrow this equipment for, I believe it was year 2 of the study. It's called nutrient diffusing substrates, and basically you deploy the equipment into the water body, and the information you're gaining from it is how the algae grow at different nutrient levels. So that's the equipment we deployed multiple years on the left, and in fact some of your staff built that equipment for subsequent use actually in this work. We also had equipment that we deployed that monitored parameters continuously. So the piece of equipment on the top right was deployed for weeks at a time and measured dissolved oxygen and temperature continuously for a period of time as well. Another piece of the study that came in year 2 was to do a geomorphology study. And what is that? What is geomorphology? It's looking at the physical features or physical characteristics of the stream. So we're talking about the slope of the bottom of Ashley Creek, the shape, the cross-sectional shape of the creek, and water depth and other parameters. But basically the physical characteristics of Ashley Creek was looked at in year 2. And the map here shows the area that we looked at for the geomorphology study, and you can see it's an even more expansive area than the water quality that we looked at. We went all the way back to Smith Lake, and again all the way down to about the confluence with Flathead River in the geomorphology study. So this part of the study was pretty interesting, and what we learned looking at this profile, which again on the left is up around Smith Lake, and going down to the right is to the confluence with Flathead River, and so you could see it's a pretty drastic change in the slope of the creek, and this turned out to be a pretty interesting piece of information for us. You can see from the pictures there, the creek is just physically different in terms of not only the slope, but just appearance and whether or not gravel was present on the bottom of Ashley Creek, things of that nature. I think on the next slide here, we talk about some things here. So again, the natural or physical characteristics of Ashley Creek. There was no gravel or potential for recruitment of gravel as you get down into the lower reaches of Ashley Creek. That was something we learned. It's a low gradient or low slope, as you saw on the previous slide, as we get kind of into town and then again out to Flathead River. So low gradient and U-shaped. In that reach. Also low flows in the late summer and fall, and you see some impacts from Flathead River in terms of backwater in those lower reaches as well. So all that led us to believe that really the lower segment of Ashley Creek is not the typical Western Montana wadable stream that Susie mentioned, which is what DEQ uses to apply some of the nutrient regulations and standards. So not only did we learn that, but another part of the geomorphology study was the impacts of the natural or physical characteristics on things like the biology and the aquatic life. As you get into those lower reaches, you're going to see different insects and different aquatic life, fisheries, and things of that nature as well. So, UAA definition and process, we want to start by what exactly is a UAA. And it's a use attainability analysis is what it stands for. And to further define that, it's a structured scientific assessment of a water body's ability to achieve or meet water quality standards. And depending on the outcome, you may then go forward and update regulations. So for us, structured scientific assessment, that's the study work that we've been talking about with the water quality, the geomorphology, so on and so forth. So the studies we performed, our water body obviously is the lower reaches of Ashley Creek, and the water quality standards we're talking about, those would be temperature, dissolved oxygen, nutrients, i.e. Nitrogen and phosphorus. And then to update regulations, we'll talk about the step in the process where we'll need to go to update regulations and looking at the state rules in that. So to talk a bit about water quality standards, those have many components. There's classifications for waters. There's different uses for waters and parameters as well. This is part of state law, and the standards are administered by DEQ and rules and policies and guidance as well. So water classifications, all waters in the state are assigned a classification. For Ashley Creek, we have the table here. The lower segment of Ashley Creek is classified as what's called C2, C-2. And what that means is there's at least one or typically multiple uses that are associated with those classifications. So does a water body need to be used for bathing, swimming, agricultural, industrial uses? So how do you want to use a water body? That ties back to how it is classified by DEQ. So currently, lower segment of Ashley Creek is classified as a C2. So to take that forward with how a water body is used, again, typically multiple water uses, and from there, criteria are established. So if you have a use for a water body, then you have an associated criteria that is set that you need to achieve so the water body can be used for those purposes. And the type of criteria or standards, again, examples, dissolved oxygen, temperature, nutrients, pH. So to move forward and update regulations, we need to demonstrate that the current standards are not attainable. So getting back to the UAA, use attainability analysis, that's what we're analyzing, is can the standards be attained or not. And then in order to answer those questions, you perform a study or studies, like we've done here. EPA outlines 6 factors as causes for not being able to attain a standard. And so to move forward in a UAA, you need to achieve at least one of those. And in the information and data that we've collected on Ashley Creek, we think we meet 2 to 4 of the factors listed. And you can see on the screen there, those factors are, it could be naturally occurring activities, naturally occurring pollutants, low flow, low water levels. They can be human caused items, or economic and social impacts. So EPA has outlined those 6 factors. Then for the UAA process, you would move forward to rulemaking. So if you have information to lead you to believe that uses are not attainable, then you would propose new water quality standards that we'll talk about here specific to Ashley Creek in a second. Those proposed standards would be reviewed and approved by DEQ and EPA, and then Montana must adopt those proposed changes into the new water quality standards. All right, so where are we now in this process, and what are some of our next steps? So as Doug and Susie mentioned, this was a multi-year effort. So there was a lot of information and data collected. We pulled that into a comprehensive report, a UAA report. And in that report, we did 2 main things at the end, which was to revise the Ashley Creek reach that we were proposing new standards. And so right now DEQ has the lower segment of Ashley Creek identified, And in discussions with them, they guided us to expand that closer to that break point in the slide where we had, steep bottom of Ashley Creek, and then it becomes kind of the lower gradient. So part of this work was to identify that break point, if you will, between the steeper slope and Ashley Creek and the difference in physical characteristics. So we did that in the report. And then we also proposed the new water quality standards. So I think we're gonna jump right to that. So the proposed standards. Items 1 and 2 at the top there are kind of boilerplate items. What's listed as A does the first thing I mentioned, which was revise the reach of Ashley Creek that the proposed water quality standards would apply to. So that's item A, is just talking about the stretch of Ashley Creek. And then items 1, 2, and 3 at the bottom are the proposed standards. So seasonal concentrations for dissolved oxygen, a water temperature threshold, and then seasonal nutrient concentrations as well. So that's kind of cutting to the chase on the UAA report of what we're proposing. So with the report, it was submitted to DEQ on January 28th, the full draft, comprehensive report, and we are awaiting their review comments. We're hopeful they're minimal. This has been really through this whole process, a really collaborative process with DEQ. As I mentioned, every step of the way they were involved. There was a lot of communication back and forth, and that includes with the UAA report itself. So they have the final draft, and we're awaiting their approval. So what have we completed? We've, as I've described, completed the scientific and technical studies that we've needed to. And as I just mentioned, we've worked collaboratively with DEQ and consulted them along the way as the regulatory agency in this, the state regulatory agency. What do we have upcoming? We want to get into our public outreach and process and public outreach and involvement, and talk about, have a similar presentation as this. What is a UAA? What has the city been doing for 5+ years, right, in this work? Talk about the wastewater treatment plant and the investment the city has made in that over the years, those types of topics. Also upcoming, as I just mentioned too, DEQ review and approval of the final document. And then really from there, we hope and plan to meet with EPA sometime this spring, maybe in April. And following those discussions and their review and approval, we would move into the rulemaking process that I described before. So. Back to Susie. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. We recognized about 10 years ago that Ashley Creek was unique, as I said before, and didn't match the Western Montana Wadable Stream water quality criteria that was being applied to it. This UAA process has been very critical to ensure that the water quality standards align with the natural conditions of the creek while still protecting the highest attainable uses. I think that's really important to note, that we're still protecting the water quality and the highest attainable uses as a part of this process. Our analysis shows that the full attainment of current beneficial uses isn't really feasible due to the creek's natural conditions. By revising the standards that we've proposed to reflect these realities, we can ensure compliance is based on science, not and unrealistic expectations that are applied regionally. And that's really the standard we're being held to now, is a regionally applied standard. Something else that is very important to us is having appropriate discharge limits. And that's very key for the city of Kalispell. By adjusting the water quality standards to match the creek's natural conditions, this allows for fair and achievable discharge limits while maintaining those same environmental protections. It's also important to recognize regulatory certainties and how they really benefit everybody. Clear site-specific criteria reduces the uncertainties for stakeholders, ensuring that compliance efforts are meaningful and not wasted on unattainable goals. This certainty helps municipalities, stakeholders, and regulators work together towards implementing an accurate regulatory compliance process. And finally, I think it's really important that improving future planning and development is really a major goal and a part of this process. With standards that reflect the true capacity of Ashley Creek, we can make really good informed decisions as a municipality about what the future projects hold for us, balancing the environmental stewardships with responsible growth. So, I mean, it's very important that we know what we need to do to make improvements to our wastewater treatment plant to meet some accurate standards that are being applied to us. By changing the standards, it doesn't negate the fact that the city of Kalispell will always have to make improvements to our treatment plant to meet certain standards. As we grow, we have more nutrients that are going to be discharged. So at some point, we're going to have to make improvements to the plant. But having site-specific, scientifically based standards is very important for the city, and this. I guess it's very important to the city. So another takeaway for us is that through this entire process, we've collaborated with DEQ. It's been very transparent. We did intensive studies and sampling and monitoring and evaluating based off of DEQ's direction on what they need to make really good informed decisions to move it to EPA for approval and then ultimately to bring it for approval to the state. So very collaborative process. And you can see it in the results and what we've provided to them, that they're willing to take that forward to EPA because we have really good data to move that forward. So we're excited to be at this point. We did submit the UAA to DEQ. Right now they're reviewing it, although they've been reviewing it with us for the last 5 years. But they'll take another internal tough review of the UAA, and then we anticipate meeting with them and EPA to move that process forward. We can't move forward with the UAA, or DEQ won't move forward with standard adoptions without EPA's approval. So we really have a lot of meetings to move forward with. We also understand that the public are big stakeholders in Ashley Creek in this important water body. So we will be setting up stakeholder meetings to meet with the Lakers and other conservation groups to talk through the process and what we've been through and why we're proposing these new standards with DEQ. So that concludes the presentation. Again, it was purely informative, but we're happy to answer any questions council might have.
Mr. Nunley?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for doing this. I actually grew up on Ashley Creek. I spent many springs and summers and falls hiking up and down miles stretches of Ashley Creek. So it's been something that I've watched for well over 30 years growing up around it. And then my mom and stepdad still live on Ashley Creek in the house that I grew up in. And it certainly has changed, I will say, tremendously. Where their property used to be an island, now the whole stream has shifted into a different direction, and seeing the growth that has gone up around it, it certainly has changed that waterway immensely. And so with that, you said you'd meet with stakeholders and different organizations. Are you planning also on people who live along the creek and who set up their trailers or fifth wheels along the creek where there's no septage or anything, to discuss these things with them to try to help clean those things up?
I didn't anticipate going and knocking on doors specifically outside of the corridor for trailers that are parked right along the stream corridor on private properties.
But
in
at
that
least
manner.
a blanket type sending out.
We can hold a public,
Holding
an
a public
open
meeting.
house to
Yep.
invite people, the stream corridors and property owners to come in and have conversations. At one time, there was a stakeholders group that, that was Ashley Creek property owners or that lived adjacent to it.
Okay.
And I went to one meeting, but I don't know if that group is still together. But
Okay.
we'll definitely try to get a message out to hear from the public on that. In going through DEQ, as they go through a water quality standards update, their public participation, public hearings are a part of that too. So they're going to hear from the public also
Okay.
as a part of that.
Well, I just want to say thank you for doing this, because this is what ultimately makes Flathead Lake, whether it's dirty or not, right? And I appreciate everything that you guys are doing to protect the clean waters that we have. So thank you.
Mr. Graham?
So what does, hypothetically, I suppose, I remember having this conversation, it could have been 5 years ago, and at that time there was talk of testing upstream, up of the discharge point for the treatment plant to find out, water quality upstream versus water quality downstream. And obviously, probably a lot of that goes and is dependent on the amount of water that is available to mix it with. So what does Ashley Creek look like if we were to shut our discharge off downstream? What would the flow look like? Let's say middle of summer.
That's a great question. Do you have a good answer for that?
It'd be about $2.5 to $3 million less flow in, or
A
water
million
flow in there.
gallons?
So,
Yeah.
million gallons, yeah. So you
Right,
think about
okay.
taking that much water flow out of there, there would probably be mostly Flathead River backing up in there from my
Right.
opinion. So wouldn't be much
It
flow
would
coming
reduce
down
it
the-
significantly. Yes.
So
Summer months. Do you know what it is? Or?
I don't have it quantified, but it's a significant amount of the flow. The effluent is.
because I remember talking about this back then, and that was what we were understanding was that. And I don't ever know. I don't know if we ever got into the answer of what it looked like upstream versus downstream. I think it was worse upstream than what it was downstream because we were mixing our stuff with it, and maybe the numbers would go through and change and everything after our discharge. But a part of all that discussion was at the time was, and I'm bringing this up because it was talking about future planning and stuff on here. But if this doesn't happen, do we start looking to going east?
Oh, discharging into the river instead of discharging into Ashley Creek. Well, we'll start looking at a few other options. Yes, yeah. I mean, one option could be to make the improvements to the wastewater treatment plant, but we're talking millions and
Yeah, and I don't know what those.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so we could do that, or we could look at moving our discharge to the Flathead River, which would also cost quite a bit of money, to be honest, because we'd have to pump it and pipe it down there, and we'd have to get a new discharge permit also. So hurdles for sure that we would have to jump through. We could do some hybrid discharges. We could discharge into the groundwater. We could do some irrigation through the summer times. Those are small little potentials that really don't take a lot of the effluent away from what we're discharging. We're just a big discharger right now. So we could look at some of those options. I think what you would see us ultimately doing is comparing a new discharge in the Flathead River, which would actually be going to the exact same spot.
Right.
Versus improvements to the current wastewater treatment plant. So I think those would be the two main that would really rise to the top as we went into the future on those. We don't really know where we stand as far as nutrient standards. Right now, a couple years ago, they adopted a bill to change it to narrative standards, and really those have not been adopted yet. So I don't really know what standards we will get applied to our new permit as we go forward. It is really in regulatory limbo. Setting these water quality standards takes us out of that consideration because we know what it should be. So I think that's hugely beneficial for us moving forward. So we know how to plan for what type of discharge we need to provide to protect the water quality in Ashley Creek. And that's really what this is doing for us. But Chad, I'll figure out the flows though and get that to you so you have that.
That's fine.
Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all the work that went into this, obviously years worth of work, and I appreciate that. I did have a question in terms of the process, having the public process after the submission of the report rather than kind of, having this. I found this report very interesting. I had a lot of questions about it, but it's kind of mute at this point because this report's already been submitted to DEQ. And I imagine the public might feel the same, that they might want to have weighed in on the report and some of the conclusions there, but it's already submitted to DEQ.
Right. Well, it is a scientifically based report. So we looked at it, through the lens of a scientist, and that's the report that was submitted to DEQ. And DEQ will then move it forward if they feel it's applicable as a part of that. So, but we are definitely willing to hear back from the public through the process, and so is DEQ and the EPA alike. So,
Okay.
I mean, Susan, when they'd open up a whole public comment period,
they
For
have
any new
to
permit.
as a part of the standards.
so that would come later in that process.
It's not a done deal, if you will. There is still a good 6 to 9 months left out to go through. They go through water quality advisory committees through the state, and that it has to be approved through, I think it's called WIPIC. So there's multiple steps to move forward to adopt a different standard as a part of that. So
DEQ is also doing a public process to
Absolutely.
get input on
Absolutely.
this report.
Yep.
And,
absolutely, yep. But we first had to submit the report to DEQ to get the process started. But yeah, there'll be ample time for public involvement and comments.
okay. So I don't know if now is appropriate time then, or, I mean, I had questions about some of the statements in the report. I don't know if I should be asking those or save it for a later process point, or,
You're more than welcome to ask those, or you could send me an email to the group and I can get those back to you also.
okay.
It'll give me time to prepare a thoughtful response and have our consultants weigh in on it.
Okay. Maybe I'll do that, and so I don't take up too much time with a number of those questions. But one of the things I did want to ask about is this target of 77 degrees for the creek. That doesn't kind of take in consideration the impacts of climate change and either getting to where, I mean, there's no mention of climate change at all in the report, I found surprising, but in terms of its influence on temperatures now, but also 77 degrees based on our data today might provide that room that we need, but 10 years from now, it may not because of that changing warming of waters and so forth. Was that considered at all, or?
I don't think we looked at what climate change would affect the stream in 10 years. I can think through that to provide an answer to you, but we looked at the natural and existing temperatures of Ashley Creek right now, and that's what was recommended in the standard update.
Yeah, I just wonder if we get to the same point we're at a few, a decade down the road because of that.
And I would say to that, then at that time, DEQ should step into the picture and apply different standards to us, and we should have to adhere to those if that's what they think needs to make the water quality standards different at the time because of climate change. So I think that's when our regulators would step in and provide the appropriate standard to be applied that we would have to adhere to for that.
Would reclassification in this way, does it make it easier for others in terms of their pollution levels on the creek in terms of, I get how it's beneficial to us. I worry about setting that standard that then other polluters, other users on the creek might take advantage of and their allowances.
Well, the process that we did to review Ashley Creek, we went through 5 years of very extensive scientific data gathering and evaluation and recommendations as a part of that. And then we were going to go through an intensive public DEQ and EPA review before they would move that into a site-specific standard. So I do not believe that as a part of this process, which is a process that has been developed by EPA, for these scenarios exactly, when there is a current use being applied to a segment of a water body that is inaccurate, that it needs to be changed. And that's the process we're going through. So I don't think other people are going to be taking advantage of anything. They would have to go through a very similar process on a water body if they wanted to change a or change a standard being applied by DEQ.
For another water body. But in this water body, they have the new standards that are more lenient, I guess.
They're not really more lenient. They're accurate. They're not more lenient standards. They're accurate standards to be applied, and then DEQ would take those and apply them, equitably amongst the dischargers. So it's not leniency. It's just accuracy.
No, and I get that. I'm not challenging, I guess, the data in terms of the accuracy of those numbers and stuff. And I
don't think it takes away either the importance of having a good riparian and a stabilized stream bank either. And those programs don't go away. There's very strong programs, non-point source programs in the state that, everybody has an opportunity to take advantage of, property owners. They have that opportunity to take advantage of those. That doesn't go away. Those are still important aspects of a stream corridor. It doesn't take away from any of that.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess my skepticism in it is, again, not so much the data, but the end conclusion that it's the current state is the product of the natural conditions of the creek. And I understand, the natural conditions make it harder to reach the outcomes for those standards. But I believe that the current condition is the result of, yes, some of those natural conditions, but also the septic, the agriculture, the impacts that have occurred on the creek, over the last 70 years or whatever. And to conclude, the conclusion that it's natural rather than kind of the combination, the fact if you did improve some of those things that we're talking about, the riparian and septic and agriculture and our own discharge and so forth, that we can't actually improve and get below what the current state is, because the standards that we're setting, that we're saying this is what the new standards should be, are based on the current conditions. But I think the current conditions are based on a very impacted creek that could be improved. And if you take away if you set the standards at the current set, I understand it's not feasible for us right now with our facility and technology and so forth to meet those standards. So I understand why we want to say that's not feasible for us, but to set a different set of standards based on current conditions takes away kind of the incentive for others along the creek to try to restore back to better conditions, because there's a lot of restoration that could occur along the creek, right? By saying the current baseline at current conditions, which are very impacted conditions.
Council member, I think I understand where your argument, but it's not within the city of Kalispell. You're talking about all of the other users that are non-regulated.
Right.
But that doesn't, we can't manage that.
I agree.
So we have standards for what we discharge into. That is what this evaluated says there are challenges with that, hence the site-specific demand. So your argument, though, it goes beyond the city of Kalispell.
Exactly.
But then I would take that to DEQ, but there is no regulatory component within there. So it's understandable to have that thought process, but I'm not sure what the end game is in that, because those are all unregulated uses and potential dischargers. So to try and argue against having a site-specific analysis for us on that principle is a self-defeating purpose.
So if we back up, and I don't know the regulatory procedures here, what's left, but if we backed up to that slide that talks about the different reasons why you could set a new standard, because to me, that argument that makes sense, right? That there are these impacts that we don't have any control over that are making it near impossible for us to meet the standards. That's an argument, makes sense, I totally understand, I think it's accurate, and so on. That's a different argument than saying the creek in its natural state is at this higher base level, and you have it all wrong in terms of what base level we should strive for to get to through restoration, even though the restoration is stuff we have no control over. It's a different argument to me, and I don't feel comfortable saying, oh, it's all natural and we can't ever get there, versus we could get there if we had a system where you could go and have control over these things. If DEQ and EPA were as stringent with, the septic systems and the farm and the riparian vegetation and so forth, but we don't. That's not how the system's set up, and we can't get there currently. They're different arguments, and so I feel uncomfortable with the conclusion of the report because of
But the report is built on the data that's in its state right now.
Right.
And it is natural if nothing else is changing. There is no regulation on it.
Yeah.
So in that scope, it is a natural conclusion of the state of Ashley Creek.
Like I said, I do have some questions about things in the report that I could get into, but so I disagree with this. I don't know for sure, but I have some questions about that report and the conclusions that were come to.
Sure, and when you want to put your thoughts together and put it down, I'll be happy to go through that and provide a response to everybody on what that is. I imagine that, speculating of course, that there are other people in the public that have the same considerations that you're having right now, and we're going to answer that same question over and over and over, actually. So happy to get that from you, and we'll give you a sound response back. And again, we did take we spent a lot of time in going through and providing very scientifically based recommendations. So the science supports what we recommended. And we have a lot of collaboration with DEQ and their well-regarded scientists that work through that. So we wouldn't have recommended a standard that we would have thought would have been a detriment to Ashley Creek. We're really just asking for a standard to match the existing uses of Ashley Creek, which are the water quality standards at this time. So not to degrade it, but just to be accountable and accurate is really what we recommended.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dahlman?
Thank you. Thank you for all of your hard work. A lot of time and effort went into it. Just real quick, can we go back to the definition of the C-2? C-2 means it's classified as C-2. What does that mean again?
Can you slide that this way just so?
Yep, there you go.
It's small here on the slide, so I apologize, but for C-2, some of the beneficial uses that you are trying to protect are, thank you. Bathing, swimming, beneficial use of recreation, and agricultural and industrial uses. And going to the top, salmonid growth and propagation.
And okay, so if we were not discharging millions of gallons into Ashley Creek, would the lower part of Ashley Creek there still be considered a C2? Or would Ashley Creek look different without all of the discharge, the millions of gallons of discharge we're putting into it?
I think it would change the characteristics of Lower Ashley Creek just from a water quantity standpoint. As we talked before, during the summer months, which is the time of year that we've kind of focused on in terms of regulatory standards. I think just from a water quantity standpoint, at Lower Ashley Creek would look vastly different.
However, that doesn't change the water quality standard. It's classified as a C2 right now, and you would have to go through a complete effort like we're going through to change that classifications. While the characteristics physically might change, the letter of the law doesn't change.
When I'm hypothetical here, if we didn't discharge the millions of gallons, then would it hypothetically not be flowing at all, and we would have more influx of the Flathead River coming up into it? I'm just thinking out loud.
I imagine during high flows, we'd have an increase of backwater from the Flathead River for a certain amount of time, but that would be seasonal. How much would back up, during high runoff times of the year, it's going to back up more. During low flow times of the year, it's going to be much less than that. And I'm sorry, Jessica, we didn't do that detailed of a hydraulic study as far as the hydraulic inputs or effects of the river in those regards. So, and then what was your other part of your question?
That pretty much answers it.
Chad also had a question on the amount of flow, and if we were to take our discharge out of Ashley Creek, what would that look like? Now I can figure that out, so I'll give everybody an idea what that would look like. I think it would be very challenging in a logical aspect to remove our discharge out of Ashley Creek. We would have to pump it to the Flathead River, which we would just pipe it right down the same stream corridor area as Ashley Creek. I'll go through that and show everybody what that actually looks like if we were to remove our discharge from Ashley Creek. It's really going to affect it in the summertime, honestly, because Ashley Creek gets very low during the summertime. We are a big majority of that creek's flow in the summertime.
Yeah. We We have that quantified.
I
saw
think we
it.
do. I just don't have it right in front of me, so it's not going to take a big effort to do that.
Okay.
And also in the use attainability, a report that was a part of council's packet, it really does define what in the state arm what C2 classifies as, and I'll point that out in an email too. But it's on page 19 of the UAA. But I'll get that to you all so you can read exactly what C2 and in the language of the law. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Any other questions? Nobody online? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, okay.
The next step for this,
Public
I'm
comment,
a
or what are
little
you doing
confused
now?
about what, I'm a little confused about what the next step is. Is the next step waiting for DEQ to get back to us from the report we gave?
Yep, that's,
Okay.
yep.
And-
Really, this was just very informative, let you know what the UA is, the results. I answer any questions council might have. But yeah, the next step, we're really waiting for DEQ to get back to us, and then we will meet with EPA. DEQ won't move forward with standard adoption without the approval of EPA.
Okay, and is there any part of this that would come up before council?
No?
No, okay. So it's informational, and we'll just have to wait till the public comment period happens, which is DEQ's responsibility.
Yep.
It's not political, we're following the science, Mr.
Yeah.
Sorry. Second item, sidewalk and trails, Miss Gabriel.
Thank you, Your Honor. To Susie and crew, thank you very much. That was very enlightening. Mr. Nunnally brought something up that I'm just wondering about. That's the first time I've heard the possibility that there are trailers backed up to the creek, possibly dumping things into the creek that they shouldn't be. I realize it's out of our jurisdiction, but when we were at, I think Mr. Hunter was asking about stakeholders, and I'm just wondering if there's a way to loop all of those folks in to that process, and maybe you've already thought of it, I don't know, but gosh, that seems like a completely preventable thing to have people doing that. Is there a way to loop them in when we go through that process and make sure they understand they shouldn't be doing that?
I think even no matter what, we can work with our partners at the county to maybe address some of the parcels that might be in the county that might be doing that. Maybe if Councilman Nunnally could give me where you've seen
Sure.
that happening, and then I can kind of go through our resources to get in touch with a property owner at this time. Those are items that we shouldn't wait to talk to somebody if there's dumping occurring in a stream. It shouldn't happen no matter what. So we should address that right away.
Right on. And
Yeah.
that was my point. Thank you
Yeah.
for following the science and for presenting this. This was great. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? Okay, now I'm gonna go on to number 2, sidewalk and trails assessment district, Mr. Russell.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, previously, we've had several work sessions on a potential sidewalk trails district, going back several years. When it was brought up again in 2024, it was kind of requested that it gets on a subcommittee to kind of flesh some things out before being brought back to the full council. Subcommittees met several times, and at this point decided to request to bring that discussion back to the full council. So I'll kind of back up. We've had discussions on similar tables like this each time we've discussed it. And just kind of give you an idea of some of the discussions at the subcommittee. Basically, we started off with this potential assessment rate at that 0.015 per square foot. That would generate this amount, actually same thing right there in terms of total amount generated through an assessment. This would be the amount for a standard residential property, and same thing with vacant land, parkland, and commercial. Using an allocation percentages, came up with these numbers. And basically what I identified through here was, okay, on this assessment rate, if we could do, like, say, 3 projects, if we bonded out at a 20-year bond for connecting trails reconstruction. And those 3 projects taken out of the transportation plan are listed there. And I included a copy of the transportation plan so you could identify back to what those would be. Another category that we talked was about increasing the 50/50 program. So at a 4% allocation of that almost $2 million, we'd add in about 80,000 more, which would add in total of about 2.6 more blocks to the total annual project. Next one down, if we want to do specific sidewalk installation, again, going back to the transportation plan, they had prioritized some projects within there. So again, going through those different priorities, looking at, again, potentially 3 projects at a 20-year bond, that allocation amount would just about cover what we'd be looking at there. Under trails maintenance, about $60,000 a year under this allocation would cover about 6.5 miles of trails maintenance. That does not include any reconstruction. And so that almost hit our 8 miles that we have of trails that we maintain. The next 2 down, again, are out of the transportation plan. If we had designated bike lanes and striped bike routes, this would incorporate the full program between the 2. And I put it identified in the full program because they are interconnection. They are a system that just doing one or half of them, you lose that connectivity within the bike trail system. Going back down, ADA intersection improvements, again, at that allocation, under the almost $2 million, we'd be able to do 2 more intersections per year. Under traffic safety, street improvements, again, at this allocation, could add in 1 project from our Safe Streets for All analysis. For example, on this one, used 5th Avenue West. Again, bonding that out at a 20-year bond, be able to cover that expense on an annual basis. And then trail reconstruction, if we did a full depreciation on it, we'd need $677,000 per year. Even at the 20% allocation, we still fall short of that, but this is more than we have right now. So I do want to place that out, but that assumes a 20-year lifespan on some of those trails. Discussions throughout this kind of shifted a little into this assessment rate at the 0.01. So I just want to pull up some of the things that go along with that. So I changed the allocations for this, which means, like for example, on this one, you can't do 3 projects at that allocation rate. So those would have to be adjusted downward. The ones in orange are programs, 50/50 program, trails maintenance program, trails reconstruction program. Those are ones you're going to want to have a set amount every year, just so you can plan effectively. Connecting trails, you may do 1 project, you may do 2 projects, you may add some here or there, it may change on an annual basis. Same thing with sidewalk installation. But those in the orange, be best from an operational perspective to have the same amount on an annual basis. Again, you can see what it does, decreases the ADA intersection, so we'd probably have what I think we went from 140,000 down to 66. So you're taking that down, probably cutting it in half. The bike lanes, again, since those are part of the system, these allocations were adjusted to be the same amount no matter what assessment level you're going to have, if you're going to have that program in. And what these include is personnel, because they're going to have to be annually striped. So that's where that goes in. Those personnel would also aid in any of these other
Sure.
characteristics, because we didn't add personnel into any of those. So then the black box here identifies that, if you really go below this, you're talking about 400,000, you're taking a large amount out of any of that potential assessment. So it was discussed that anything below 0.01, you probably just should go away from the striped bike lanes from that component. So really, that's kind of where the discussion left off at in terms of, well, let's take it back to the council and have that discussion as it relates to that. So I'm open to any questions. Otherwise, I turned over to council for discussion-related matters.
Any questions? Mr. Hunter?
I guess if it's appropriate, I'll share kind of my thoughts on where we got to on the committee discussion. Yeah, I mean, first, my general philosophy on this is, as I think all of you have heard from me, is, I believe this stuff is just as important infrastructure as anything else we do, water, sewer, and our infrastructure for our cars. And so I do think it needs to be funded, and unfortunately, there's not funding sources out there, federal or state, like for the vehicle infrastructure, to build and maintain this stuff. So unfortunately, we do have to go with a levy to the public to seek those funds. I've heard that the comment that now is not the right time. As I've said, I've been on the council 5 years. It's never been the right time, and I understand this came up before council before I was on council a couple times, and it wasn't the right time then. So I don't think there ever is going to be a right time. I think we just need to pull the trigger, take it to the voters, and put it in their hands and say, is this something that's a priority to you that you're willing to fund? I like to see all these different, except for one I'll get into in a minute, but all these different kind of things to be funded, because I think, one, they all share the same problem, which is there's no real good funding source to adequately fund them. But two, they're different constituencies that, including these different things, will increase the likelihood that the public will support it. The folks who want to see traffic calming on their street in front of their house are not necessarily the same folks that want a sidewalk so their kids could walk to school, which are not necessarily the same folks who want to recreate on their bikes on bike trails and pass through our community. And so having funding for each of those will increase your support in the community for passing this, because they're getting their piece on it. In terms of the funding, different levels, below the 0.01, as Mr. Russell was discussing, I don't feel that it's adequate funding for the different categories. We're just not getting enough out of it. The 0.015 for the average residential household of over $100 a year, I think there's a certain psychological barrier that people see the 3 digits over $100 that would make it less likely to pass. It's gets to be a high number, so I worry about it passing at that level. So I felt like the 0.01 level was something that got there in terms of some pretty decent funding for the different program areas, but kept it below that average $100 a year for the average residence assessment. In terms of the different categories, so we had this discussion at the last committee, and I did do a little more reading on it, and reinforced my opinion on it. But the striped bike routes, I've read just haven't proven very effective for their intended purpose. I do think it's important to have bike routes, but I think putting them on a map that's available to the public online or in paper or whatever is good. And then maybe putting signage in the boulevards or something, marking where they are, but having the annual maintenance of painting them on the streets. They're not, given the cost of over $200,000 a year, I don't think it's worth the benefit you get from those. And these are what called the share rows. It's the painted bike and arrows in the middle of the lane that's saying this lane is shared by both bikes and cars. I don't think they're effective enough to justify that cost. So under this scenario, I would just allocate enough funding just to put in some signs and create the maps, but not the annual maintenance of paint on the ground, and then allocate that funding to the other programs there, ensuring that the designated bike lanes are fully funded. And the difference there, designated bike lanes are the, off on the side of the road, the lane, the white line painted lane there on the side of the road. That's more typical. So that was my thinking behind it, and that's what I would support bringing to the voters.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, here's a shocker. I'm going to disagree with Councilman Hunter. I do think that this is a terrible time to go through and put something like this out there. I think it feels tone deaf to what our residents are experiencing in their own budgets and their own pocketbooks. We hear about taxes all the time. At the .015, you're looking at $133. You're looking at $90 at .01. If you live in a HOA, you're going to get hit twice. You're going to get hit with your HOA dues. You're going to get hit with your residential property tax. So, I don't think that works for people right now, especially, we're talking about this, and I do disagree that it's, Ryan, you said that you think this is something that we're supposed to be providing as a government and stuff, but the stuff that you see on here that goes to and gets provided when it comes to trails and sidewalks, whatnot, that's provided by development. When you go and you have a subdivision go in, the developer pays to put that stuff in, and it goes on to the cost to buy the piece of property. So, in our committee, we went through and we took sidewalks out of it, and I can't think, maybe that might have been another $2 million or something, another $2.5 million for a program for sidewalks. But why were you okay for taking that out if it's our responsibility to go through and be providing that? So at some point there is a breakdown on the numbers that goes in is not an acceptable amount. So what I'm saying is in the past, you've gone with, whether it's an increase in our rates or whatnot, there's been some rate increases in the past where you're really concerned for how that's going to affect your constituents in your ward. And we're not talking anywhere near $133 or $90 a year. We're talking, it was like a couple bucks a month. So I don't know how this escapes that type of scrutiny for those in your ward when other things were scrutinized for that. The other thing is, absolutely for me, the bike lane and the designated bike routes are out. I do not see that, and definitely to not go through and stripe them is a safety concern. We have new drivers all the time driving on our roads, kids driving on our roads and everything, and I really think that as much signage as you can have being out there showing that you are driving on a shared bike lane with bicycles. When you have a truck, an SUV, a car, it needs to be delineated as much as possible for the safety of the bikers. My other aspect for the designated bike lane and the bike routes is the expectations that are possibly and expectations that we're setting for those that are using it with the bikes. And we talked about this at the, I don't think we can meet those expectations of the level of service for keeping those areas as clean and clear as possible. I mean, look at it out there right now. I know that our expectation would be, is this going to be maintained as a street and everything, but I just know that when it comes to gravel and ice and snow, ice clumps and slush and stuff like that, you're going to have people trying to go through and use these areas expecting that it's completely usable, and there's going to be times where it's not usable. So I don't even know. Maybe there's like a time frame when you don't have them as a designated and shared bike route. I don't know, but for me, I would ask the council, don't even take this to a council vote. It is not the time. It's not appropriate. I said in our meeting, I said, you know, the thing that I could get behind is going through and maintaining the trails that we have, because I could go through and say, we should be taking care of our infrastructure. But I'm not for moving this forward.
Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, just respond to some of those.
Yeah.
Since you brought me up, I'll touch on them. So a few things. So in terms of cutting the sidewalks, the sidewalk insulation is still in there. I believe what you're referring to is I had proposed replacing the 50/50 program.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It was a big bill.
Yeah, and it was, I dropped that proposal because after learning more, one, that it would be a huge cost, so something that we probably can't afford at this moment. And the reason for that, my idea was you would come in and fund the 50/50 program like we're implementing it now, which is doing a few sidewalks at a time. It was explained to me that because of liability concerns, that if we took over the legal responsibility for the sidewalks, that we would want to replace all the failing sidewalks in town all at once. So it'd be a big bill. You wouldn't have to do it kind of incrementally, which is what, you know, I had thought and was proposing to do. So that's why that was removed. In terms of kind of my past concern, I'm always concerned about the impact on people's pocketbooks and the costs. You know, I've made an issue about the impact fees and oppose that specifically because the question, the context matters, right? In that case, it was shifting, you know, the cost from developers, which I know they pass on to their new buyers of a new development, but still it's shifting the cost from them onto our residents in our older housing stock, among others, where this is not shifting the cost from anyone. It's funding infrastructure, just as, you know, I supported increased fees when we have to do improvements to our water sewer infrastructure and so forth. I have in the past supported increased fees despite my concern about impact on people's pocketbooks when I think we're funding things that are integral to what the city provides for the community. And in this case, this is also different because it's going to the voters. Ultimately, if the voters think it's too much of an impact on their pocketbook or it's not the right time, they can vote it down. So we're giving them an option. We're not voting on this to say, you know, this is going to happen without their say. They get a say. So that's why I'm comfortable with that. Third, in terms of the safety issue and share rows, just again, to kind of make the distinction, there's the bike lane, which is off on the side of the road and a painted line, and that's the designated bike lane. I'm for funding that. I think that's appropriate. The striped bike routes are where the bikes and the cars share space, and there's that kind of painted bike symbol and arrow in the middle of the lane called share rows, And the research I've read recently is that it actually decreases safety. That they found that despite the theories of why it might increase safety, that research of where it's been implemented has shown that in fact it may decrease safety. Given that, and that may be, early science or whatever, early research, but given the cost of it, I decided that in my opinion, it would be not be worth the cost on that.
I think if you're going to designate it as a bike route, you're going to want to follow the signage as identified in the manual on uniform traffic control devices. I don't know if that identifies it as a painted stripe, but I'm going to guess it has those paintings on the floor or on the ground, and we're not going to want to not follow the MUTCD. So we can find that out if that is their approved signage for those routes. But if you're going to designate them as bike routes, and it requires painted on the streets.
Well, then let's not designate them. I mean, there are people using them now, without all that. So, the safety issues are existent with, people biking on these roads now with it. So, I mean, I personally, I have real problems with the manual. I think it's out of date, and, I don't think
I understand that is what we follow.
I know that's.
Got opinions on all kinds of things.
I do.
Mr. Nunnally?
Thank you, Your Honor. I see the benefit in doing this. However, one of our major roles, and we passed a levy, an emergency services levy recently for law enforcement, fire, and EMS. Well, part of that law enforcement thing is a bigger thing than just the city of Kalispell. And that goes into Flathead County and a jail detention center. And that, I know the commissioners have been working on it for years, but the rumblings that I keep hearing is that it's getting a lot closer. And the last thing I would want to do is run with a mill or a bond or anything right now out to the voters when likelihood is there's going to be a jail request coming up here pretty quick. And I would hate to foul that up by bringing in another bond or levy on top of this. So I guess where I stand on this right now is I can't vote to bring it out to do anything because I would hope that we're going to see a jail request coming up this year. I would hope. I don't know, but I would hope. And I think it's in our best to not go out for asking more right now at this point, even though there are some things on here that I agree with, I like, right? I just don't think we're there, and I don't think we should be going out for any kind of a request right now. So for the long term, I can't right now. So I'm a no.
Mr. Dowd?
Thank you, Your Honor. So I hear frequently about sidewalks, right? I hear about some of those other categories every once in a while, but the big thing I hear over and over and over is the sidewalks. Like my street doesn't even have sidewalks, or my sidewalks are failing, or whatever. If you go down to the 0.01 bracket, it looks like you partially fund everything to ensure that every single category is probably going to fail because nothing's fully funded, right? It's like a half attempt to try to fund some of these things. I think maybe the shotgun approach on this with all these different categories will probably, some people that are in some of these fringe issues will support it, but the majority of the people that they're going to see all of these different categories and they're going to go, all I wanted was sidewalks, and what are you guys doing, right? I also think it's a bad time to go out for another levy. We just did it last year. So I have a lot of issues with this proposal. I would love to see one thing just fully funded and like a sure thing. But I'm seeing a lot of, we're going to cut it back. We're going to cut it back so it's not that much of a financial burden, but nothing's fully funded, right? So anyway, those are just some of my thoughts. I was not on the subcommittee, so this is my first time seeing this. So these are the thoughts that are fresh in my mind after just viewing it.
Anyone online? Ms. Carlson?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just would like to mention that I totally agree with Mr. Nunnally. Considering the detention center, the jail, that's going to happen sooner or later. And I just agree that we need to be supportive of that before we put anything else on our citizens. So that's all. Thank you.
Ms. Dahlman?
Thank you. Boy, when I was out knocking doors, and what I hear from people still to this day is sidewalks, 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 just like Councilor Dowd was just saying. I am definitely in support of, having multimodal ways of transportation in Kalispell. But I think I am in agreement with Councilor Dowd I think I'd love to see something fully funded. Sidewalks, sidewalks, sidewalks is what I hear. So, I mean, I would like to put it out to the voters. If it were a fully funded one object deal, I would love all of it, but I'd prefer to see, one thing fully funded. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dahlman. Other comments? Mr. Fisher?
Having sat on the committee, basically, I agree. Thank you, Your Honor, very much. With Mr. Graham, I just, with what we've already passed, I am very concerned that going to the voters now. I understand what Mr. Donnelly is saying. I agree on the sidewalks. My biggest concern is maintenance of existing trails. Having come from this background, we have some nice trails, 7.9, highly used. I don't think it would get its own special vote or we would never go to the voters just for that, but we need to keep up on that maintenance of these trails, or soon they're junk, unusable, unsafe. I think Chad would say that too from parks. And it happens with the county too. They just slip into total disrepair. And soon you have a heck of a liability out there with a huge investment that has gone into it. So from my perspective, I understand the sidewalks. I like the 50-50. It shows some buy-in. I like that program. I'd like to see it increase somehow. But again, I go back to maintenance of these trails. They'll be junk. They will be heaved up with tree roots, unsafe for our children, unsafe for any biker, walker, anything. And currently, the Parks Department in the city, if I understand my facts straight, is much like the county. There's no allocated funds just for that within the parks budget. Is that a true statement?
Funding for what specifically?
For trail, I mean, you do what you can, but there's no money set aside for chip sealing, overlays, or reconstruction of existing.
Yeah, not on an annual basis. We do within the parkland. We have it's set up with their its own fund to track some of those things, and obviously with the parkland, we're not going to anticipate any resurfacing for quite a while. But the rest of them, it's there's not a dedicated funding stream for that.
So there would be my one area to say, voters, do you want to take care of what the city has invested in, securing these rights of ways, building the trail that's there? Sometimes there's terrible sub-base under them that weren't even built to a certain standard in some cases. That we have areas that are slumping, as I said, heaving up from tree roots. You have to take care of the investment that is out there. Do I know the process to get there? I wish I had, just like I did with the county for years, some magic wand, but we cannot expect to rob from maintenance of parks that are highly used, probably more used than trails, but we must adequately find a way. And if somebody agrees with me that the voters could say yes to that, I think voters want to take care of what they invested in already. And even though a lot of it is in-kind money or outside money, those have to be maintained, and we're not currently doing it, nor plan to do it.
Mr. Nunley?
You're not gonna get a disagreement with me on taking infrastructure that we own or built and put a lot of money into
Yes, sir.
and not putting money down.
Yes,
And I don't think we should be looking to add anything until we figure out how we can maintain what we have done. Sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. We did have one gentleman show up early on when we were meeting, and bottom line, he just says, I'm being taxed out. I'm at this stage, I have my house paid for. You'll recall him, Chad, Ryan. I just can't do anymore, and I feel that. I feel that for a lot of people here. And to go out with this for something that many people do enjoy. Yeah, I'm a user of trails. I walk sidewalks. I would love to see it all. So how some of these cities afford to do all this amazes me. Maybe that's why they're broke. But again, I would really like a work session then maybe on how we properly fund the man at the back of the room to take care of what he has. And I don't know where that is, but I can't support anything to the voters now either.
One question, remember, a few months ago, comes out quite often whenever there's a national election. What's the average amount, what's the percentage of population that has less than $400 in savings in this country?
50%.
50%. So what is it in this county? I'm betting maybe a little higher. And we look at this and go, we're gonna tack on $133 a house. They're barely able to stay in it. You know, this is the quandary we're in. We sit here and try to figure out how do we prioritize between the wants and the needs, and I don't quantify all these as wants. A lot of these are needs, but then we have to prioritize the needs. And we went out for the EMS levy because we saw a substantial need now and definitely in the future, not just to cover cover service for our residents within the city, but because of all the traffic and everybody that comes into the city that may require those services. And the voters responded overwhelmingly. Unfortunately, Mr. Nutt, as you say, we sit in this position where we can go to the voters, and that's great, but at the same time, we have these pressures from Helena. They'd like to make us the blame game. We're the problem. We are the reason we don't have affordable housing. We don't have, people being able to afford their rent because the cities are running out of control, spending their money, blowing their budgets up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, we look at what we used to have for a tax model, what used to cover education. We can't even pass an education levy for the high school. And we're looking at adding this for sidewalks, trail district. I get the need, but where I look at it, I also go, wow, given the choice, if I'm going to vote and I've got something for the high school or if I've got something for trails, we need to be investing more in education because in all reality,
Amen.
What we're seeing is such an underfunding of education. Do you know how much a first-year teacher makes in Flathead County, in Evergreen, Kalispell districts?
It's not much.
About $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so we get the pressures. We want to put this. We want to add $133. We want sidewalks on both sides. And what I'm hearing from the other side, on the development side, is what can we do to reduce standards to go to one sidewalk on one side? Do we need the street lights? Do we need all these things? Because if we can reduce the upfront cost, we can reduce the price of the lot and maybe try to hit some of these price points. And then we're going to come back on the backside and say we're going to tax you for it because the developer didn't put in the sidewalks. If we want all these things, it costs money from somebody. And that's where really, when we look at the prioritization, and this is where we get demonized, because somebody out in the public has this as a higher priority than what we as a council body might understand as another priority, that through years of experience or it's some report from staff or something says, no, this is more important. We need to get this done. I mean, I understand this, but in all reality, I look at so many other needs, and I looked at EMS. It was easy for us as a council to get behind that levy and push that levy. I'm going to find it really easy to get behind the county and say, we need to push and get the levy done. We need new jail facilities. We need bigger facilities there. It's going to be really hard for me to go out in the public and say, yeah, we got to vote for this. This is a real need. I mean, safety is one of those things, but I mean, I ride my bike all around the streets as it is today. And dare I say, even when I'm driving, it's rider or driver beware. This is where we struggle. This is where we struggle with, how do we slice and dice this? And when we have to go back to the taxpayer, I mean, I hear from that gentleman. Yeah, there's only so much that we can do. And really, you go back over the last several years, we've made a lot of decisions that have been little incremental, but those little incremental add up. And as you say, Ryan, yeah, we get behind these things because we know we need to, we have to, but that's because we have to be able to deliver water, we have to be able to deliver sewer service, we have to be able to pick up the garbage. Those are the things that we need to do to maintain a safe, clean municipality. This is one of those other areas where it's a little harder to jump behind when there's some of these other issues, and we've just pushed costs so high. I mean, I get it, I understand it all the way around. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but there's also a need. So, yeah, I don't know. I struggle to go forward right now with that. Can someone buy a lottery ticket?
I would say this stuff is just as important safety-wise. I mean, when you talk about these,
I mean, I hear you. I know there's importance in here for safety. I get it, but.
But I mean, your whole presentation sounded like this is kind of lesser, and I would just strongly disagree with that.
I'm not saying it's lesser. I'm just saying, where is it at in the priorities? Because we only have a limited source of money we can go after. And I know some of these other uses coming down that I know, talking with in the community, is going to have a higher priority amongst the community. I just struggle throwing this out there right now, and especially 0.01 going, let's sprinkle a little bit everywhere, but none of it's effective. Not quite the right analogy, but yeah, and that's why I said, understand there is a safety issue here, and safety is important, but we have a lot of other important things, and I struggle with it. Like I say, it's a tough one all the way around. I just struggle moving forward with it at this point to go ask with this kind of an approach.
I do want to just say thank you to the committee for taking the time to review this, because I did think it was important for the committee to take a look at this to see if we could do something. Now, having the hard numbers and looking at it, I just can't support it. But I don't want that to be lost on the thanks of you guys putting in your hard work, your time to go through this exercise. So, thank you.
Just to push for this one more time, I think Parks Department does a good job trying to keep up with what they can. They're spraying weeds, they're mowing alongside the trail, but I really think it needs to be investigated to properly fund that somehow, not through a special vote, but we must maintain that huge investment of the 2 miles, just as we plan to take care of Parkline. It's just as important, and we have to come up with some system for that.
Agreed.
I think really you kind of look through here, some of these items, it's really trail reconstruction, once again, reconstructing what we already have, trail maintenance, those types of things. I mean, is there a scaling back of this? I don't know. But what I'm saying is the full Monty,
Right.
I struggle with right now. So, other thoughts, questions online? No? Anything else? Any further?
I guess I'd ask what the follow-up is then. I mean, if there's support for trail reconstruction and trail maintenance and maybe sidewalks, is there support for scaling this down to those two, trail maintenance and sidewalks?
I think it needs to be done somewhere throughout the budget we currently have. I'm completely against going to the public for asking for more money on something like this. I ran against that.
Let's look at it in the budget.
So,
We're this
yeah.
close to budget. Let's look at it there and see is there some of this we can absorb somewhere else? Is there some, pardon the term, as you say, Mr. Nunley, can we doge something out of this deal? But is there something we can do, find within the current budget, and then go, this is what we would, we're a month away.
Yeah, I've just been asking every budget season, I think, since I've been on council, kind of questions to Doug about, funding sources, trying to find funding for this stuff. And the response I've gotten, or at least the impression I've gotten is, yeah, it's not there. So, I mean, yeah, I'd love to see it, but,
That's what I'm saying. Let's go through that and just walk through with that budget process and see, because then we can look at Mr. Russell.
Our budget's not hard to read through. As we were doing the MS levy, we had over 80% of our general fund went to police, fire, and those support, court, legal office. So then you're down to that remainder 20% of our general fund budget. What you have is whatever mills we don't levy.
Yeah.
That's your general fund. And then leveraging when we have opportunities for grants, which is what we do. It's,
But my bet is by the time we get to budget, we'll know. I'm not sure if it's a bill yet or where that's, but if we don't levy the mills, they're gone forever.
that's one of, that is.
So there may be a point where we go, look, we may not need to levy 10 mills. But at the risk of losing them forever because of what some knucklehead in Helena decides to do, we may levy the 10 mills and that may do some of this. That's where I want to look at the budget, because there's a lot of game changing. As I say, I just don't trust what they're doing in Helena with some of the things, because we're an easy target. And if we see something like that, we have not levied all of our mills for many years, but we may be forced into a position where we have to levy all of our mills. And it's going to be really fun explaining to the taxpayers we did it because Helena made us do it. So
we're not going to put it before the voters to vote on. We're just going to vote to raise the mill. Okay. That seems like, based on the conversation, I'm a little confused, but.
Well, what I'm saying, Mr. Hunter, would you like to, in the next 2 years, not have 10 mills because we didn't levy them? And they're just gone?
No.
No, we want to maintain that flex. So they're going to force us into that government agency, I don't know if it's true or not, the rumored government status of, here's your budget, if you don't spend it, you lose it. You don't get appropriated that next year. That's essentially what I'm hearing, their approach. So that's what I want to say, where do we get there? And then look, is there something here? We can make that decision. Do we want to levy all the mills? What is that impact? What's that do? So, Mr. Fisher?
My understanding, it takes about 30,000 to put something to the voters, the cost of it. Give 30,000 to take care of some trail we have. We've been money ahead.
I actually heard an interesting statistic of with 1015 420 from the conception of in 2001 to today, we're actually like 23 or 24% lower in buying power because of how 1015 420 is. So if they go and they say, well, you're not milling everything, we're now further behind. It's sad.
But on the flip side, our taxpayers can't pay it.
Correct.
So, I mean, any other questions, thoughts? Online? Nope. Okay, any public comment?
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thanks.
You want to give us public comment?
What's that?
You want to give us public comment?
I always want to give comment. Maybe
Nobody
not suitable
online?
for public though.
Okay, Mr. Russell?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, just a few items. Looking at next week, Monday is President's Day, so we'll meet on Tuesday. One of the things we'll likely have on there is, we have, 10 plus well sites. We've heard a lot about wells over the last couple of years, but they're in various stages. Our Buffalo Hill wells having some mechanical areas that we need to put some attention to. Probably be over 80,000. That's why it comes to before council. Probably look at an emergency resolution to speed up the process, to get that underway versus going through the traditional procurement. Obviously, we have a pretty good idea on our vendors and who we've been working with, but it's one of those things we'll probably have to bring in a couple cranes to lift the pump and mechanisms out of the well to do a full analysis. So we'll probably have a emergency procurement on there. Just kind of wanted to give a little bit of a heads up on that. That way we can get started without a 30 to 45 day delay to go through there. That way we're set up for the summer. Let's see. Thought I had one other item, but I think I'm good, Your Honor.
Okay. Anything else from council? Nothing, Mr. Nunley?
I'm going to just take a quick little bit here, and that is, many of you have seen the Robo Scout Squad and their robot over the last number of years. They just went and competed at state along with teams from all over the state, and I am proud to say that the Robo Scout team will be going to represent Montana at the World Championships in Helena, and I'm pretty proud of that. And, since it's my wife's team that she has put together and fostered through that. But even more exciting is we'll have a second team going to Worlds to represent for Lego robotics in first. So West Valley had a team that will be going to Worlds also. So I think it speaks highly of the youth that we have in this community, and they're wanting to look forward to the technology STEM efforts. So just thought that was pretty good to highlight.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hunter.
I believe we do have public comment that might have been missed with Mr. Dowd's.
Restrict the public comment to the.
Oh, no, just public comment. I was just,
If I could take a couple of minutes, I'd.
well, you're out of order, sir, but go ahead. No. That's true.
Good evening. I'm Ron Gerson. Good evening, Your Honor and Council. And I come here, and I hope I don't ramble, but if I ramble, it'll be brief. I've spent the last 2 weeks, but intensively, with the exception of a few hours of watching the birds fly high yesterday, involved in the general situation of immigrants in our valley, in our city. And I really there's nothing specific that I wanted to bring to your attention other than the fact that we have a small segment of our community that is really suffering fear and insecurity. Valley Neighbors, which I am on the board of and a major volunteer for, is here to provide, our mandate is to provide security in as much as possible for the immigrants who are here in our valley. And we are stressed to the gills, as they are stressed to the gills with the uncertainty that's coming down out of DC. And I was heartened by Chief Venezio's comments that were, as he was quoted in the Daily Interlake, regarding racial profiling and just the complications that are coming down. The uncertainty has impacted the entire community, some more than others. We're all individuals. We react to insecurity and uncertainty differently. From the point of kids not being sent to school, meaning being held back from school because they're scared about what's going to happen. The parents are scared that folks might come, law enforcement might come into the school and take the kids away. Vice versa, the kids are insecure because they're worried about the parents. Folks who commute to work who feel insecure, worried that because they've got darker skin, they're going to be stopped and pulled over with less than the usual, probable cause. I just wanted to bring to your attention what we can do to take those feelings of really productive members of our community into consideration on an individual level, on a council level. I think it's really important. And again, I applaud the KPD. All along, they've been the most accessible and the most flexible and understanding of the law enforcement agencies that we have here. Long may that continue. But it is something that's going down in our community, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention that I don't know if there's anything, it's a situation that evolves on a daily basis. So, and the uncertainty is as limiting and as destructive as any particular action that might actually come down. So it's got people scared, and scared people aren't happy people. So anyway, thank you for your time and for your understanding.
Thank you, sir. Anything else from council? I had a bevy of things, but I'm going to let them go.